Story 1. There once was a cabin on the edge of a dark, foreboding lake. The cabin had been abandoned for many years, and locals whispered of strange occurrences and ghostly apparitions in the area. Despite the warnings, a group of friends decided to spend a weekend at the cabin, hoping to uncover the truth behind the rumors. As night fell, the group settled in for the evening, but strange noises and eerie shadows soon had them on edge. One by one, they began to vanish until only one remained. As she searched frantically for her missing friends, she heard a strange whispering coming from the lake. Suddenly, a hand reached out from the water and dragged her beneath the surface. The next morning, the cabin was empty, and no trace of the friends was ever found. Some say that their spirits still haunt the lake, pulling unsuspecting visitors to their watery grave. The cabin still stands, but now it's known as the haunted cabin by the lake, and travelers are warned to avoid it at all costs. Story 2. There was once a small town nestled in the heart of the mountains. The townspeople went about their daily lives, never giving much thought to the weather. But one day, an ominous cloud appeared on the horizon. It was unlike any cloud the town had ever seen before. It was black as night and seemed to be alive with an energy all its own. As the cloud drew closer, the townspeople became increasingly uneasy. The sky grew dark and the wind picked up, whipping through the streets with an eerie howl. And then the cloud was upon them. It descended upon the town, engulfing everything in its path. The townspeople were horrified as they felt the cloud's tendrils wrap around them, pulling them into its depth. Those who were caught in its grasp were never seen again. The town was left in ruins, and the cloud hung ominously over the wreckage. No one dared to enter the town again for fear of being consumed by the cloud. And so, the cloud remained, a constant reminder of the terror it had unleashed upon the town and its people. As time went by, the cloud never moved. It just hung there like a curse upon the land. And it was said that the souls of the ones who were taken by the cloud were trapped inside, forever trapped in its darkness. Story 3. There was a man named David who had been suffering from severe migraines for years. His doctors had tried everything, but nothing seemed to help. One day, while lying in bed, he experienced a particularly vivid hallucination. It was a dark, twisted forest, filled with twisted, gnarled trees, and a feeling of dread that seemed to permeate the very air. David couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a hallucination. He was convinced that the forest was real, and that it was calling to him. He became obsessed with finding a way to enter the forest, and eventually discovered a powerful hallucinogenic drug that allowed him to enter into the dark world of his mind. David began to spend more and more time in the forest, and soon he found himself unable to distinguish between reality and his hallucinations. He started losing touch with the people around him and became more isolated as he spent more time in the forest. As David's obsession deepened, the forest began to change. The twisted trees grew larger and the darkness seemed to deepen. David could feel a malevolent presence in the forest, watching him, waiting for him. He knew he had to escape before it was too late, but he couldn't find his way out. David's family and friends were worried about him and tried to intervene, but he refused to listen. Eventually, David was found dead in his bed, his eyes wide open and staring into nothingness. He never left the forest, and his body was found in the same twisted position as if he had been dragged by something in his mind. David's death was a mystery, and it was never clear if it was the drug or his obsession with the forest that killed him. But it was clear that the forest was not just a hallucination. It was something darker and more sinister, and it was still waiting for its next victim. Story 4. Jan was a popular Twitch streamer, known for her love of horror games. She would often stream herself playing through the latest and greatest horror titles, delighting her fans with her reactions to jump scares and eerie atmospheres. One night, Jan decided to stream something a little different. She had come across an obscure horror game that promised to be unlike anything she had ever played before. It was called The Stream Killer, and it was said to be so realistic and terrifying that it would change the way people thought about horror games forever. Jan started the stream and began playing the game. At first, it seemed like just another horror game, with spooky music and jump scares. But as she played, the game began to change. The graphics became more realistic, and the jump scares became even more intense. Jan's reactions became more panicked, and her fans watched in horror as she began to scream in terror. As the game progressed, Jan's screams became more frantic, and her fans could see that she was genuinely terrified. Suddenly, the game crashed and Jan's stream went black. Her fans waited anxiously for her to return, but she never did. Days passed and Jan's fans grew worried. They contacted her family and friends, but no one had seen or heard from her. Eventually, the police were called in to investigate, but they found no trace of her. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Some say that she was consumed by the game and trapped in it forever. Others say that the game was cursed and had killed her in the real world. But one thing was certain, Jan's stream was the last one she ever did. In the game, the stream killer was never seen or heard of again. Story 5. There was a man named Jack who had always been fascinated by tunnels. He had a collection of photographs of tunnels from all over the world and would often spend hours studying them, trying to imagine what it would be like to walk through one. One day, Jack heard about a tunnel that had recently been discovered in the mountains. It was said to be unlike any tunnel ever found before, and Jack knew that he had to see it for himself. He set out early one morning and made his way to the tunnel. As he walked down the long, dark corridor, he felt a sense of excitement and anticipation. He had always dreamed of walking into a tunnel, and how his dream was finally coming true. As he walked deeper into the tunnel, he noticed that the walls and ceiling seemed to be closing in on him. The air grew colder, and the darkness seemed to be swallowing him whole. Jack began to feel a sense of unease, but he pushed on, determined to see the end of the tunnel. As he walked, he heard strange noises coming from the darkness ahead. It sounded like whispering, and Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He quickened his pace, but the noises seemed to be getting louder. Finally, he reached the end of the tunnel and saw a faint light in the distance. He felt a sense of relief and stepped forward, but as he did, he felt something grab his leg. He stumbled and fell, and as he looked back, he saw a pair of glowing eyes staring back at him. Jack screamed and scrambled to his feet, but as he turned to run, he realized that the tunnel had changed. The walls and ceiling were now covered in a strange, pulsing flesh, and the noises he had heard before were now coming from all around him. He realized that he was no longer in a tunnel, but in a living organism, and it was closing in on him. Panic set in as Jack realized that there was no way out, and he was likely to be one victim. He could only run deeper into the tunnel, hoping to find a way out before it was too late. But the tunnel seemed to go on forever, and the noises grew louder and louder until they were all he could hear. Jack was never seen again. Some say he was lost in the tunnel, consumed by the living organism. Others say that he was trapped inside, forever lost in the darkness. But one thing is certain, the tunnel still exists, and to this day, no one knows what lies at the end of it. Story 6. It was a dark and stormy night when a group of friends decided to have a sleepover at one of their houses. They were excited to spend the night telling ghost stories and playing pranks on each other. But as the night went on, the storm outside grew worse, and the friends began to feel uneasy. As they settled down to sleep, strange noises began to fill the house. The friends laughed at first, thinking it was just the wind in the storm, but the noises grew louder and more persistent. Then they heard footsteps in the hallway, and doors opening and closing on their own. One of the friends suggested they should investigate, but the others were too scared and convinced it was just their imagination. But the noises continued, and the friends could no longer ignore them. They got up, gathered their courage, and decided to investigate. As they walked through the house, they saw shadows moving on the walls, and they heard whispering coming from the darkness. They realized that they were not alone in the house, and that something was watching them. The friends became separated in their search for the source of the noises, and one by one they vanished into the darkness. The remaining friends searched frantically for their missing friends, but they were nowhere to be found. As the storm raged outside, the friends realized that they were trapped in the house with whatever was making the noises. They huddled together, too scared to move, until the storm passed and the sun rose. When the police arrived the next morning, they found the house abandoned and the friends were never seen again. Some say they were taken by the spirits that haunted the house. Others say they were consumed by the darkness that lurked within. But one thing is certain. The house was never the same again, and it became known as the House of the Missing Sleepover. Story 7. There was a YouTube channel called The Scary Narrator that featured a mysterious figure who would tell terrifying stories in a deep, ominous voice. The channel had a massive following, and people couldn't get enough of the narrator's chilling tales. One night, the narrator uploaded a new video, promising that it would be the most terrifying story he had ever told. As the video began, viewers were immediately hooked. The narrator's voice was more unsettling than ever before, and the story he told was unlike anything anyone had ever heard before. But as the story progressed, something strange began to happen. The narrator's voice began to change, becoming more and more distorted. The background music grew louder, and the images on the screen became more and more disturbing. The narrator's story was about a cursed video that whoever watched it would be cursed too. As the narrator continued to speak, viewers began to feel a sense of unease. They heard strange noises coming from their speakers, and some even reported seeing strange figures moving in the darkness. Suddenly, the video cut to black, and the narrator's voice was replaced by a loud, piercing scream. The video then crashed, and the channel disappeared. Viewers were left in shock, not knowing what happened, and many of them reported strange occurrences happening in their lives. The mysterious narrator was never seen or heard from again, and the channel has never been re-uploaded. Some say that the narrator was consumed by the cursed video he was narrating, while others claim that he was cursed by the story and was dragged into the darkness. But one thing is certain, the video and the narrator were never to be seen again, and the legend of the cursed video still persists.